Good morning, afternoon, and evening to all of you, and welcome to this session on MyData strategy of global enterprises. Just minor housekeeping rules. We are all so used to Zooming after 9 months, so I don't need to go into dirty details how we should behave and how we will behave here. Be sure to write your name, full name, as in the participant name. So when we go into the questions and the discussion part in the latter part of the presentation, when you have a question, drop it into the chat. So then we'll pick up from there, and we'll have a discussion session Q&A in the end. And there is a special Q&A session also after one of the presentations, but we'll stop there. And before the presentation, I'll start it. So as said, the presentation will be recorded, and I guess we're off to a good start. So in this next 90 minutes, or now it's 89 minutes, we're going to have a global view. We'll have 5 really exciting presentations crossing the globe, looking at from Fujitsu's global point of view. Then Ilona is taking us to a little bit further up in the Nordics, where I am sitting here in Helsinki. Oh, I forgot to sort of introduce myself. So my name is Jyrki Suokas from the Finnish Innovation Fund Sitra, and I'm honored to be the host of this session. But I'll get out of the way as soon as possible and let the real stars, the 5 stars we have here, to shine. And just a brief sort of setting the scene kind of opening from my part. So then we'll have a trip to Korea, in South Korea, in these 2 presentations from Junseok and Alex. And then we go further down under with Vincent to see what is actually taking place, exciting things taking place in Australia. And as said, discussion and Q&A as a separate item at the end. But after Ilona's second presentation, there will be a special session and chance to ask just a couple of questions there. So my idea here is that looking at the world and looking at MyData. So really these sort of the foundational things that there needs to be some sort of regulation, some sort of law, something that is actually sort of allowing these kind of things to happen. And then GDPR here in Europe, the black countries marked with the black color, really this sort of the yardstick that everybody is measuring the regulation by. But we of course with our sort of might be a little bit sort of outside in or inside out view that there is also this kind of regulation in place in many other countries and locations in the world. So briefly going through the different continents, let's do a bit of a round the world trip in 4 minutes. But if we look at the big picture, these countries which are marked with the black and the dark blue color here actually represent almost half of the world's population. And these are the countries that have a GDPR-like personal data protection regulation in place. And we will be doing a deep dive into Korea, South Korea, into Australia in this presentation. But I urge you to also have a global view, as the title of the presentation said. Half of the people, almost 60% of the world's GDP is generated in these countries. And we don't know how much of the data is generated and used, but it needs to be a massively huge portion of the all data produced in the world today. So the idea is that okay, let's do this globe hopping part. So Europe, GDPR, of course, in force in the EU countries, 28 now, 27 soon when UK is leaving us. But also we need to keep in mind Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein are also enforcing GDPR. So in that sense, now hopping over to Asia, We can see that Japan, the Act of Personal Protection Information, has been enforced. There is a lot of things, and we'll hear much more in South Korea. India has a personal data protection bill, which is again sort of aligned, but not exactly like GDPR. And then we have also Thailand marked here, and China. This is quite surprising, and I'm not getting into politics, but this is also something which is in process, and the personal data protection law, PDPL, coming into force also in China. Really interesting to see the developments there. Now going to down under, Australia, New Zealand, both have this kind of regulation in place. And again, we will be hearing from Vincent at the end of the session, news from Australia. Then hopping over to Africa, South Africa is the only one in this continent, but representing massive part of the GDP of the continent itself. Then we go North America, and here, as the US doesn't have a federal legislation on personal data protection and regulation, California does. And the CCPA, California Consumer Privacy Act, is very much overlapping and aligned with GDPR itself. And then, of course, Canada, there is the Digital Charter Implementation Act, which also gives rights and also this kind of superpowers that GDPR gives to us individuals. South America, Brazil, Chile, 2 countries to be mentioned. And there is more. So there's a quite nice resource that can be used, DLIA Piper, dataprotection.com. So you can actually go into this site, and from there they have this sort of the map on the left, but you can actually start comparing 2 countries. And here I did a comparison between Finland and Chile. And you can do all kinds of different comparisons. And this is very neutral. It's just comparing the letter of the law. It's just comparing the different aspects of the personal data protection laws in these countries. So if there is interest, I tried to count the countries, but I ran out of fingers and toes and all other appendixes. So there is nearly all of the countries in the world are covered by this information resource on data protection laws of the world. Well, I think that's it for me. And I will now turn over the presentation to Pascal. So I'll stop sharing on my side if I can hit the button. Whoop. And we are ready to go with Pascal.
Oh, hi, Pascal, you're muted.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Hope everybody can see and hear me now. So even after months of using Zoom, I still manage to stay on mute. But it must also be because Zoom updates all the time. So we have secret buttons every time we start it again. So as you can see, I'm sitting here in the Netherlands, so you can already see a bit of the back of my house. I think this is almost a new normal now, right? These days that we work from home all around the world. Like I say, I work from the Netherlands. I'm actually the CTO for Western Europe for Fujitsu. For the people that don't know Fujitsu, we are one of the top IT services companies in the world. I think ranked number 7 or so in the biggest companies. And today, in 15 minutes, I really would like to talk a bit about the future of digital data. And what I will try to do is also connect the Fujitsu vision, we call it our technology and services vision, to what MyData is doing. Yeah, so let's kick off. And also, of course, the real underline of this is how can trust in digital data make our world a bit of a better place. Let's take a step back first. So where are we now actually in the time? I think if you look at the old ages, before in the agriculture age, everything was about hand craftsmanship and so on, agriculture, information, and paper and so on, right? So we moved to a machine age a long time ago, and everything at that time was really focused on resources efficiency, on machines, on knowledge. And of course, we also had the introduction of low-cost paper, which meant we had actually books that you could read. So it was easier to also spread expertise and so on at that time. Where we are now is, I always call this the smart machine age. Yeah? So some people call it the second machine age. They even written books about this. But in my view, we are really now in the, well, close to Society 5.0, but very much in a smart machine age where everything is actually becoming smart. So we see now smart machines, smart robots. But also if you look at society and if you look at organizations, it's also much more about purpose and about agility. Yeah? So how do you change your organization to become agile? How do you work together with, previously competitors? But how do you actually work together to make the world a better place and also to find purpose for your own organization as well? And if you look at this layer of paper and knowledge and so on, it's now really about intelligence and about digital data. And actually, when I was preparing material for this conference today, I actually had a discussion with my partner. And she had people that were recommended to her in her LinkedIn and in her Instagram. And she thought this is a bit weird because these people, I do know them, but how do they know my Instagram account? So how do they actually connect with me? And I think this is really a topic that relates to this conference as well. Yeah. So how do we actually use all this intelligence and digital data, and what do we allow organizations to use actually also when we talk about people and customers? And is it normal to track GPS data, for example, and to link people together because they both have the same app installed on their device? But in essence, they never really agreed that they would be linked. And you see very strange connections coming up these days as well. So I think it's very important in these times when we talk about purpose, but that we also talk really about privacy and security and using all this digital data in a way that it's actually fitting the age where we are in now. And I think we are in a time now where we really need to figure out this position. Yeah. So we are testing it. How far can we go? But we also, I think, really need to learn the rules and how far we want to go. So if you talk about companies in this age, I think society is really about social value creation now. Yeah. So for the people that don't know this, it's, sustainable development goals, I think, are very important, the SDGs. So we'll come back to that in a second. But also getting these SDGs and create a purpose-driven organization is very important also in connection to your customers. So on one side, how do you create social value? And on the other side, how do you create customer value? And you're also really dealing with this digital data in the process as well. Often I get the question, why do you think we are in the smart machine age right now? And I think there are three elements coming together. One is really the maturity of artificial intelligence. The other one is really about computer power. Yeah, so supercomputers, new technologies like quantum, but also everything around cloud and edge. But the third very important element is about digital data. I hope you're not all looking at my slides and at the same time looking at the pictures here. But you see here on the right, if you look at digital data, it's very much about ownership of the data. It's about security of the data, and it's about trust. Yeah. So if you share data or you have personal data, how can you actually trust that data? But also, how can you trust organizations in using this data as well? Yeah. So I think that's a very important element of the discussions we are in these days. If you talk about the smart machine age, about sustainability goals, I think it's important to also look at things like the 17 SDGs. Yeah. So, for example, one here on the top left, it's no poverty. Yeah. So how to deal with poverty in the world and also try to end poverty as well. Zero hunger, health, all these kind of topics are very important for us to figure out as organizations how to deal with them, but also how to use technologies and digital data and so on to deal with this as well. Yeah. So how can we use information about weather and climate change, for example, to improve production of food? Yeah. Important topics, I think, in these times. But also companies really have to figure out, I think, how to deal with these purpose-driven goals and how to embed this into their strategies. And if you look at technologies, how can you use actually technologies to fit into this as well? And of course, we are now in this COVID time, and I hope this will all be over soon, right? We are now in a time where people start vaccinating. But what we really learned, I think, in this time is that the world is complex and uncertain. And if you look at social challenges, there are so many challenges still ongoing, right? Pollution of air, the age that children even get to in also poorer regions around the world. How do we actually train and teach children in this world? But also, if you look at trust, I think there's a big issue now on trust. Yeah. So one of the statements here, for example, 70% can't tell if online information is trustworthy anymore. Yes, I think just having data and sharing data and having news, I think that's a very big worry. Yeah, and also private data. And I was already talking about the example of the apps. I think that's very confusing. And I think the last one, and this is also an interesting one, it's all about cyber attacks and social infrastructure. And some people make this a bit of an holistic word. Yeah, they say, look at cybersecurity. I get that. But try to think, for example, how could you actually put an application online nowadays and really say to yourself, this stuff is secure. I'm 100% certain this thing will not be hacked. Yeah. So I'm putting information in there, and there's private information, maybe about, more personal data. How are you really 100% sure this will not be attacked and this will not be shared by others? And the problem is, if you share this information online, this is not your data, this is customer data. Yeah. So how are you sure this customer data is not shared? And I think this is really the time where we really need to figure out new models, how to share data, and also how to deal with private data in the sense as well. Yeah. So this concept of personal data stores and so on is very, very important. And we really need to start solving these issues now. If you look at this purpose, I think in the past we had a bit of a separation from business and purpose. Yeah, so you had goals, and we tried to make the world a better place, but business they had their own goals. I think if you really look at the new business trend, society is the new megatrend here. Yeah, so I'm trying. I can't get rid of this box. Still, I'm just continuing. This is better, yeah, because I still have this feeling you're looking at these people in my screen as well. So let me continue. So business is society, actually. Yeah. So the new megatrend for the new for this new decade is that business is society, which means also that you need to have a purpose as an organization yourself and build this really into the strategy of your organization. Also, if you look at Fujitsu's purpose, is to make the world more sustainable by building trust in society through innovation. And it also means, if you really look at how Fujitsu envisions this future, is that we really see the importance of ecosystems. Yeah, ecosystems trying to solve these kind of goals together. Yeah, you can't do this on your own anymore when you're a bank. You need to work with other insurers, but also with other sectors actually to improve these goals. So ecosystems and sharing data are very important in that one. And I think also, if you look at these SDGs, some of these SDGs will not be solved by the government. Yeah, this needs to be solved by also ecosystems together with the business, but also by businesses themselves. And the Fujitsu vision in this is that we want to be the X company that is propelled forward by two approaches. One is really this purpose-driven approach, and the other side is really this concept of data-driven organization and data sharing and so on as well. We recently did a survey on this topic, and we tried to figure out, do companies really understand these SDGs? And unfortunately, I see this slide on the right drops a bit in sharing in Zoom. Yeah, so even after months of Zoom, we still have these minor issues sometimes when we change. And so even if I have full screen PowerPoint, it goes a bit to the right. But anyway, I will try to explain it here. So if you really look at do CEOs understand the SDGs? Well, do they implement it? Did they plan it, or did they already execute it? I think a lot of companies actually have a bit of an understanding of this. But a lot of these companies actually didn't really implement it yet, or they didn't really include it into their holistic strategy. So I think this is really a work in process for many companies. And I think actually also if you look at the IT or digital side, I think it's very important to also connect this to the IT strategy and the things you're doing in the digital space. So not just your own purpose as a company, but also how do you actually operate and how do you work? I think it's also very important to connect to these goals as well. Which brings me to my final slide here. So if you look at this smart society, everything is really about data-driven digital arenas now, which means if you look at food, for example, and try to improve the food production, you really have to work together with different kind of companies. And you also need to share information as well, yeah? So maybe sometimes even information that you created or that you have as your own company, maybe it's even a core asset. Sometimes you really need to share this with others to make a better case and also to improve things together. And I think also if you look at the MyData approach in this, I think it's also very important that we do this in a human-centric way, right? So it's not so much about an organization getting data from their customers and sharing it to others. Yeah, but it's also really the customer itself plays a role in this. Yeah, so he can decide or she can decide on what information she or he wants to share with others, and also allowing them to use this information, maybe even get paid for it. Yeah, and maybe not paid in euros or in dollars or in yen or whatever, but paid for maybe services on that as well. And this model should be really working in a sort of trustworthy way. So it's, well, of course you need to be able to trust other organizations in this, but you also need to trust the data. And actually also consumers and customers, people need to be able to trust these kind of systems as well. And I think to give an example of this is the example of camera information, sensor information, IoT information. It's not that difficult to make a smart city smart in that sense, yeah. To really find the information about people and to track people and to have sensors everywhere and measure everything. But before you know it, you really get into this privacy space of people. And I think if you really want to be smart, smart doesn't mean get all the information you want, but also try to find out the information you can actually use also more anonymously, so people can have their own privacy in this world as well. So it was very nice talking to you in this way and to present to you. Although it's always weird to talk to my camera and to my laptop and you are sitting behind your screen. I would have preferred to see you in live person as well. Maybe we can do this next year, but so far, thank you very much for listening so far, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the MyData conference.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Pascal, for your presentation. There is one question which we have time for, and this comes from Teemu Ropponen. Is the Fujitsu transformation survey public? You mentioned the survey. Is that public, which is available?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't checked if we published this already, but what we normally always do is that we create external material out of this that we actually publish. So I have to check if we published this already, but yes, this will be publicly available in some press release or on some report. But I have to look up the real link to that. Yeah, so if you want to know more about this, not sure what the best way is to do it, but otherwise you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn or through email or whatever, and I will look up the link and share it with you. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. I will make sure I post it somewhere as soon as I found it.
Excellent, thank you very much. And the second question from Wu, we will take that part in the last part of the the whole session, because I know this will be a long philosophical discussion, and we unfortunately don't have time for it. So we're letting the next speaker, Ilona. The stage is now yours. So we will stop presentations, and there you go.
Thank you very much. And can you please confirm, can you see my screen and the presentation here?
Yes. Loud and clear.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So hello, everyone. I know that some of you are already in the afternoon and some of you are in the early morning. So I'm just going to say hello, and it's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Ilona Ylinampa. I'm the head of information management here at Fujitsu. And thank you, Pascal, who is my colleague in the Netherlands, for very interesting presentation. So let's now dig a little bit deeper on why and how technology should be seen as a method instead of intrinsic value. And then I will also share some examples of human-centric Finnish data cases so that you can see what it could be like in reality. And a few words about me. Not going to bore you with a long pitch talk about Fujitsu or myself, but just a very few words. So I run the head of information management here at business. So that's everything from data architecture to artificial intelligence and software development. And then we have our own IPR solutions as well. And I'm a firm believer of combining commercial benefits with technological solutions. So technology definitely should not be seen as a goal itself for us to make us digital or something like that. But it should be seen about how can we gain business benefits or commercial benefits, or how can we overall replace manual work when we have digital tools for us. And I've been working in the sales for over 20 years and in ICT for over 10 years. And I've also had the pleasure to be awarded as the nationwide sales director of the year here in Finland in 2019. And I'm also very passionate on doing this outside of Fujitsu as well. So I'm a board member of Finnish Information Association, Divia, and also a member of Innovation and Competitiveness Committee of Technological Industries of Finland. And as Pascal mentioned also in his presentation, Fujitsu is a little bit different from some other IT companies in the sense that even though we're the 7th largest globally, we're actually one of the few companies in the IT field who can offer the whole end-to-end solution. So everything from hardware and IT infrastructure to software and laptops and everything in between. And we believe in doing this in a human-centric way, so that we want to make the world more sustainable by building trust in society through innovation and create customer value, so that we always have the customer and their benefits at the core of what we're doing. And when we're thinking about our customers these days or the society overall, there's not actually any more IT industry in a way that no matter if you're in retail or finance or whatever, the digital transformation is truly changing the way that you're working and how you should be working in the future. Because we have the social transformation, we have the end users, and we have the industrial transformation as well. So everything that we're doing, we try to keep the customer at the core and think on the ways that we can actually bring benefits for the individual users in that, so that we can rebuild the trust in the society as well. And I believe that this fits very well the purpose and mission of MyData Global Mission 2, because MyData Global wants to be making human-centric data economy happen and making it right, so that we have this kind of global policy or rules on how we're using individuals' rights and how we're actually combining the digital transformation and technological possibilities and making it in a fair way as well. And my Japanese colleague Dixon Siu is actually a founding member of MyData Global as well, and a member of MyData Global Board of Directors as well. And we have had the pleasure to be doing collaboration with MyData Global for several years as well. And we actually have our own solution called Personium as well, which is fitting well to the MyData global perspective as well. So if we look into digging a little bit deeper, what is happening at the moment when we're thinking about why is data so significant and why it makes sense that we should be interested about the data economy and making it fair, we can actually see that data could be the 6th or even 7th contractive or wave, in a sense that we've had the industrialization with steam engine textile, we've had the electrotechnology with mass production, we've had the automobile with individual mobility, and we've had the ICT, information technology with information. But data is actually, it's really transforming the way that we're working in a new way as well. And we really haven't yet come to the situation where we could actually combining, utilizing all the possibilities that we have in the technological perspective and making it fair in the same time. So we're kind of like at the new normal or new age, so to say, which COVID-19 is of course affecting as well. So why is there a need for human-centric data economy? Well, actually, The Economist already wrote in 2017 that the most valuable resource is no longer oil, but actually data is the new oil or gold in a sense. And of course, in that perspective, we need to have fair rules on how we're utilizing the personal data. For example, with Facebook and other solutions, are our personal interests being sold to commercial perspectives without us even knowing about it? So we need to have an approach towards trust and creating a fair economy in that sense, so that we're combining all these technological possibilities with the way that we're also taking care of the individual rights. And if we're looking at the global data economy in a sense, what is happening at the moment is that there are actually when we're thinking about, for example, I come from a European perspective or Finnish perspective, we have two very, very large operators. So we have USA, the Silicon Valley and so forth, and then we have the Asia. And Europe and Africa is somewhere in between these two giants in a way. And I believe that it's in everyone's interest, both in personal and company level, that we're utilizing and doing collaboration with these different regions and these different companies. And because these organizations are working with different legislation, different methods, it's important to have a global data economy and rules around this. And why is data or artificial intelligence and everything in between so important is that, as I mentioned, the data is the sixth wave or contractive in a sense. And this can be seen from business perspective as well, that PricewaterhouseCoopers did your annual global CEO survey last year in 2019. And from there could be seen that over 63% of CEOs worldwide see that artificial intelligence, for example, will have a wider impact than internet revolution, for example. So it's really changing the way that we're doing things and how we're operating in daily sets. And what Fujitsu can do in this is to be your partner in creating this kind of digital muscles. So, of course, when we're thinking about organization, no matter it's a public sector organization or third-party organization or private or whatever, the leadership of the organization, of course, need to show the way. Vision and strategy, where are we going towards and what should we be focusing on? And then one important factor is what is often unfortunately forgotten is that we need to have a business integration with our digital tools, so that we don't have the IT here and then we have the business here, but they're actually talking together, so that we're not only taking some solutions because of the purpose of becoming digital, but we're actually doing it so that it's gaining benefits to our business and our other needs as well. And we need to have the value from data in a trusted way, so that we're respecting our individual rights, the personal rights and so forth, and also that our data is looking towards future and not only sharing what has happened in the past. And of course, no matter what we're operating with these days, is we need to have an ecosystem of correct partners and customers, so that we're gaining this kind of triangle in a sense, so that we're really aiming towards win-win collaboration instead of just closing the deals and then disappearing or something like that. Because none of us, no matter what we're operating with, can do everything by ourselves, as the world is changing in a rapid way. And of course, at the core of all this are the empowered people and the agile culture. So in a sense, in the organization, the balance sheet and the value of the organization is actually in the people. And the responsibility of the leader is to make the balance sheet, the organization and the staff to return to the organization the next day, so that they actually are giving what they can, and share the knowledge inside the organization. So remember this: the balance sheet is in the people, in the brains of them, and how they're operating, and we need to do this in an agile way. And then I'm going to share some examples of Finnish human-centric data cases. I have 3 examples today. So I'm going to discuss about global UNICEF AI project for children, which we're doing. Then I'm going to share a few words about IHAN project, what we're doing together with the Finnish Innovation Fund Sitra. We did this kind of My Travel Health app on that. And then a few words about Clever Health Network with Helsinki Uusimaa Hospital District, and how we're using their data and personal data of expecting women and how to avoid gestational diabetes. So first of all, this example from UNICEF. This is a global project that I'm very proud of. Only 13 partners worldwide were chosen to this or selected to this project. So as we all know, the artificial intelligence and data overall is affecting also the way that children are seeing the data and how they're seeing the materials online and so forth. And therefore, in this global UNICEF project, we're creating a policy on how to utilize the AI, but do it in a child-centered way. And we're using as a solution AI Nuora system, which is doing predictive analytics through artificial intelligence. And the purpose is to identify young people who are at the risk of social exclusion, so that we can actually predict from the words that they're using and how they're speaking and so forth. And of course, making it anonymously on their data, so that we can do the improved targeted intervention to avoid them being socially excluded, and therefore also reducing healthcare and other costs. So that we're making their lives more better in a sense, and improving their life quality, but also helping them to stay on board, so to say. And this model can be applied to school-age children as well. And we will be sharing the policy later next year. And then other example with Sitra on this MyData, My Travel Health. And together in this project, we have had the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health and Social Insurance Institution Kela together with Fujitsu and Sitra. And the whole purpose of this IHAN project is to build a foundation of fair data economy and building common concept for data sharing. And this My Travel Health is a good example because it's combining customer experience, digital services, up-to-date information, and international data management in a fair and secured network. So the whole purpose is that the citizen can have their health information from Kanta healthcare network, and this can be filtered and summarized in the international patient summary perspective. So that, for example, if a Finnish patient travels to Hawaii or Japan or Australia or wherever, that the local doctor could recognize the international structure of the health information that is available in this app. And also the citizen can monitor the information in this app as well. So this will be very, very interesting project that we have been working on. And the idea is not to build a new storage, but more empower the citizens by combining their existing health data. And the third example is with Clever Health Network with Helsinki Uusimaa Healthcare District, where we built this kind of AI application for treatment of gestational diabetes for pregnant women. So we did this kind of model and service based on AI. And the idea is that it improves the treatment and monitoring of gestational diabetes by this kind of mobile application, which measures, for example, the mother's glucose levels, physical activity, nutrition, pulse, daily weight, and stores this information. So that the idea is that the healthcare organization can then provide guidance based on the metrics, and also the pregnant women can view their own data so that they can transform their habits or their nutrition and this kind of information. And I think that this is a very good example of the human-centric way, because we're not only improving the quality of the pregnant women, but we're also improving the health of future generation, the babies that they're expecting. Because because we're now reducing the risk with health risks, and we can also monitor and check or who are at the risk of developing type 2 diabetes during the pregnancy. So really proud of this project as well that we've been doing together with the Helsinki-Uusimaa district, healthcare district here in Finland. And overall, our president, Tokita San, has said in our technology and service vision that we want to be a strong partner for our customers, helping them deliver successful digital transformation. So it's really at the core of everything that we're doing. As I said, we're all in IT business in a sense these days, because digital transformation is transforming the lives significantly. And I would like to end my presentation by highlighting that the way that we have been doing things in the past cannot really accord to the current situation anymore. And therefore, the most dangerous phrase in the language is we've always done it this way, because the world has changed, the way that the citizens and individuals are utilizing their data and utilizing the technological solutions has changed. So we cannot afford to continue doing what we've always been doing. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer to those if we have time. But Jyrki can take a lead on that. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your insightful presentation, Ilona. And I don't see any questions in the chat, so please keep those coming. While we're waiting, I have one question for you. Sure. So what actually differentiates the human-centric companies, which you define in your presentation, from, let's say, are they inhuman companies or what are they? Let's call them other companies. So what actually differentiates companies that are calling themselves human-centric from the others?
That's a very good question. And first of all, I would like to say that, of course, we cannot divide these very, very strictly, that these are the human-centric companies, that these are the non-human-centric companies. But I would say that what's maybe common with human-centric companies or organizations is that when they start, for example, some project related with IT or technology or information overall, they first listen to their users on what kind of wishes they have, or what is the current situation and how could we improve this. And typically human-centric organizations also tend to do a pilot first, so that you can kind of like proof test on what you're doing before rolling it out to the whole organization, so that you can do it in a structured way, and also that you can transform the way that you're building the system all the time based on the users and the individuals' feedback. And of course, keeping in mind that how does this, in theory, how does this help others, and how can we do this in a secure way, so that we're also taking care of the personal data of the users.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And again, taking the needs and the problems of the individual in play, and making sure the results actually fulfills all of those requirements is an excellent way to do things. I agree. Okay, Ilona. I know you're off next, so we will not be seeing you in the Q&A session. So this is the final chance for the audience to present any questions to you. But as we're not seeing anything, I think it's time for us to take a short flight. Oh, okay, there's something coming from Teemu. It's slowly building in the chat. So let's wait for Teemu to type the actual question.
Yeah, and of course, if any questions or feedback comes later on as well, feel free to reach out to me in LinkedIn or by email or however. So it's ilona.ylinampa@fujitsu.com.
Excellent. So while we're waiting in suspense, there we go. Okay, there's Teemu's question. As your experience with the innovation cycles, when do you see MyData-based solutions being an essential part of Fujitsu offering?
Well, that's a very good question indeed. And actually, we already have an existing solution for this. So we have this Japanese solution called Personium, which is actually fit into the MyData usage as well. And we have ongoing cases here in Europe as well around this. So of course, I would see that this is a business area which is growing all the time more and more at Fujitsu. So it is it is there. We have existing solution and we have existing customer cases in Asian perspective, and we're looking forward to getting them in Europe as well with the ongoing discussions.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I think now it's time for us, as it's half past, to take a very short flight to South Korea and then have two excellent presentations coming up from the Korean perspective. So Junseok, the floor is yours.
Hello, I'm Junseok Kang in MyData Korea Hub and Fujitsu Korea Limited. This is a great honor to have this opportunity to present today. From now on, I'll start my presentation under the theme of Korea gaining momentum and what we are doing. First of all, to understand the meaning of MyData in Korea, we need to understand the present Korea first. Korea has achieved unprecedented economic growth with a strong viability to live well, despite a war, 2 coups, and the intense political turmoil of dictatorships and democratic movements. For example, Korea achieved 686 times the GDP economic growth in just 50 years. However, the rapid development of manufacturing and trade as the top priority was based on individual sacrifice and effort, and the social inertia of company rather than individual, growth rather than distribution, and conservatism rather than progress has created a diverse conflict structures. In order to overcome this, the national consensus and social foundation must be created, in which individual dignity and sovereignty can be guaranteed. And I believe the key will be MyData ecosystem and self-sovereign identity in the digital age of the fourth industrial revolution. So, as a democratic politician and a human rights lawyer, President Moon Jae-in has been aggressively promoting the data economy, along with strengthening personal information protection. Since Korea has the strong presidential political system, the will and goal of the president are the most important momentum to set the direction of Korea. Here are the 2 excerpts from 2 presidential speeches. 2 years ago, he said, "You can use secure data while clearly following the principles of privacy. We cannot overemphasize the importance of privacy in the information age." And this year, he also said, "We need to design the future, thinking about the importance of human-centric values as well as economic values. We will minimize adverse effects such as technology misuse, data bias, and personal information infringement, and strengthen the social safety network so that jobs that disappear do not damage human dignity." In order to realize the president's philosophy and policy direction, all major ministries and agencies of the Korean government are engaged in various specific activities. They are trying to readjust regulations, open their data to the public, develop new MyData services, and conduct pilot projects. In particular, the Data 3 Acts were passed by the National Assembly this January. This was possible because of the long-standing activities of the government, especially 3 important policy events this last year. First, Digital Government Innovation Promotion Plan. Second, Digital Innovation Pan-Government Task Force to drive the policy thoughtfully and quickly. The last is the third best plan for public data provision and utilization. This effort and process have served as an important foundation for the Data 3 Act. Then, let me explain Data 3 Act. Data 3 Acts are the 3 amended laws to create the MyData economy. Personal Information Protection Act, the Credit Information Act, and the Information and Telecommunication Network Act. They include new contents. First, Personal Information Protection Commission is much strengthened as a control tower for personal information protection. and pseudonymous personal data and data consolidation institutions are newly introduced to activate the data industry. Finally, MyData operator can appear as the new business entity in financial sector. But this is just the beginning, and many regulations will be supplemented so that MyData economy can grow more actively. So, 9 institutions for MyData exchange and 2 institutions for data consolidation have been already decided in financial sector, and more than 116 companies wish to license MyData operator. But the first application was limited to companies that provide similar services. So 35 financial and tech companies applied for first license, and some of them will be approved next January. Well, the other opportunities will continue to grant more licenses in financial industry. In the field of healthcare, 3 institutions were selected for data consolidation. MyData operator is expected to appear in various fields, such as public, retail, education, mobility, as well as finance and healthcare. However, there appear many issues and concerns. Most importantly, people don't know MyData very well. Companies and institutions are simply approaching MyData as big data or open data systems. So the government's roadmap schedule is likely to be delayed, and the personal data sovereignty may be neglected and social consensus be lacking. The level of understanding of MyData gives birth to various and serious issues: concerns about privacy and security, anxiety that I might fall behind others, anxiety that big companies will dominate the MyData market, and distrust. Then the distrust can make the foundation of MyData weak at the beginning stage. MyData must be transparent, secure, open, and easily acceptable for anyone to join in MyData ecosystem. For this purpose, MyData Korea Hub is doing its best, and Fujitsu will also do our best. MyData Korea Hub is the center of MyData movement in Korea, and he will promote the ideas and elections to establish a social consensus of MyData for trust. To this end, I hope MyData Global Hub will serve as a leader by sharing advanced experiences, user cases together. And Perisonium should be widely used through various use cases. Perisonium is an open source PDS software and reflects the idea and direction of MyData Global Hub. And Fujitsu Korea will also contribute the capability from 46 years of business in Korea to create MyData business that anyone can easily and comfortably approach. I'd like to introduce what we are doing for MyData. We had a hands-on workshop and deployed the open source Perisonium unit with support from Dixon and Akio in Fujitsu Perisonium team. And Perisonium team has ever joined the DID event as a presenter to introduce MyData principles in Korea. This collaboration between DID Alliance and Perisonium is a good example of creating and spreading the MyData ecosystem in Korea. Also, Fujitsu Perisonium team attended the founding ceremony of MyData Korea Hub last November to celebrate the foundation and hold a presentation. Fujitsu Korea is exploring MyData use case with TUI Consulting and cooperating in various ways to spread MyData in Korea. TUI Consulting played a leading role in the founding of MyData Korea Hub and deployed the Perisonium UI for the first time in Korea. And Fujitsu has shared his experience and solution together to strive for the successful development of MyData in Korea. Finally, the roadmap for Fujitsu Korea to contribute to Korea's MyData economy. 2020 is the beginning, and we are preparing the blueprint and master plan. 2021 will be the introduction stage, and we will create meaningful MyData reference and develop the platform to execute MyData principles. We will make a leap forward in 2022 and expand our MyData movement and business in various areas. So we will create a rich and safe MyData ecosystem. Anyone can participate easily and comfortably. Fujitsu Korea will be a good friend and partner in Korean society with beautiful platform that grows for real MyData. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, everyone can see my screen. Is it fine?
Yes, it's fine.
Great. So hi, everyone. My name is Alex, and I'm a senior manager at Round Secure, a Korean ICT company. In my session, I will try, without repeating what Mr. Kang already said, I will try to explore further MyData concept from a Korean perspective. And before that, let me briefly explain the Korean context. As the personal information protection has been increasingly emphasized over the past 10 years in Korea, and officially starting from September 2011 with the enactment of the Personal Information Protection Act. Personal data protection has been further enhanced with the amendments to Korea's 3 major data privacy law passed by National Assembly in early this year, actually. And the protection of personal data has not only been pushed by the Korean government, but it has also been enhanced by the financial regulator that released the plan for MyData industry back to 2018. So you can see in July 2018 in this graph, there were a release of the plan for MyData industry. And following the amendment to the Korea's 3 major data privacy laws, as Mr. Kang explained before, the financial regulator released MyData license guide that confirmed its commitment in regulating financial data use for protecting users' data. And this license guide provides guidelines on how companies can apply for operating MyData business. But what is MyData business? So MyData business, actually, it comes from the idea that data is being considered as the oil of the 21st century. In a society that is moving towards a data-driven economy based on technologies such as AI, big data, etc. And these technologies are being pushed by the digital New Deal of the Korean government, who is investing significant amount of capital for developing them. Such commitment of the government has also been reflected by the amendments to the Korean 3 major data privacy laws, as mentioned before. And among the 3 major data privacy laws, the amendment to the Credit Information Use and Protection Act has opened the door for adopting the Personal Credit Information Management business, also known as MyData business. In Mr. Kang's presentation previously, he mentioned about like MyData operator. So MyData business corresponds to that, and it refers to a business model enabling companies to collect and analyze users' personal financial information dispersed across business sectors such as banks, insurance, or telecommunication operators, and to offer to users an integrated management of this data while making them available in a single place. So let's say the idea is to enabling the right to a portability, to data portability. It allows individuals to manage within a single platform a wide range of personal information, providing more convenience with the data management. And also it offers business opportunities to service providers that can offer tailored product recommendation and financial counseling based on collected financial data. But it's this kind of MyData business. Any kind of company cannot, run it. It's not easy like that. The company needs to get a license for doing so. And for doing, and actually this, in fact, MyData license was recently launched by financial regulator following the release in last August of the personal credit information management license guide. So I will, in my next slide, I will just explain a bit about this program, which is a 3-month screening period program operated by the financial regulator. And it's designed for companies aiming at entering in the MyData business, such as investment advisory, investment management business using robo-advisor, e-financial business. So as you can see here, most of the companies that are kind of targeted by this program would be more like from the financial industry. So it's kind of my financial data. We can see that like that. In terms of requirements for getting a license for operating a MyData business, there is 3 main requirements. The first one, technical. Company needs to comply with relevant computing and equipment facilities. Also, company needs to comply with a minimum capital of 500 million won, which corresponds roughly to 360k euros. And also legal requirements, company need to comply with relevant rules of conduct. The current status of this is lots of interest from the industry. So actually 116 companies have expressed their interest into getting the license. And actually 35 companies officially applied for getting the license. Last news was mentioning about 29 companies are still running for getting the license. And the announcement of the MyData review will be done next year, early next year. We'll conclude this MyData part by making a small comparison with MyData principles. Even if MyData principles are not clearly stated in Korean MyData business, we can see that MyData principle seems embedded in the policies of Korea's MyData industry. If we review for each MyData principle, we can see that there is a push towards a human-centric control or human-centric approach by Korean government, as they are looking for enhancing consumer rights to data ownership by enabling them to easily check, manage, correct, or delete their data. They also look for more consent of the data subject. So there is various similarities with the principle of MyData. Except maybe one, which is interoperability. I've been discussing with MyData Korea Hub, and it seems like government is not clearly mentioning about interoperability in terms of MyData business. MyData actually has been being very popular in Korea, along with another technology that is in favor of giving back control of personal data to users, which is called the decentralized identifier. I'm sure a lot of you guys heard about this technology, but to make it simple, in Korea, it has been a fertile ground for this technology adoption, since there is a high adoption rate of smartphone in Korea that's pushing online services to develop, to increasingly being developed. But the thing is, for getting access to these online services, you need to go through different kind of logging process, etc. So it creates users fatigue. It also creates danger in terms of exploitation of personal information. And another part that explains the popularity of DID technology is the amendment to the Electronic Signature Act in 2020 that raised interest in new SSI. So by SSI is self-sovereign identity-based authentication system. In this context, a lot of Korean companies decided to develop decentralized identity project, and it has been also pushed by the Korean government that decided to launch a lot of POC involving DID technology. For addressing those kind of needs from Korea, we decided at Round Secure to develop OmniOne, which is a technology that combines the standard for biometric technology called FIDO with decentralized identifier to provide users with a secure and convenient way to store their personal information and reuse them for getting access to service provider services without over disclosing them. To make it easy, this is kind of service flow. I will not described in detail, but the main part you have to know is like in this kind of SSI part, there is a user that will create this kind of credentials, a digital credential that will be stamped, that will be certified by an issuing authority. This issuing authority will give back this proof to the user that will store it on his device. He will be the owner of this credential, and he will be able to prove himself when accessing to a service from online service providers without over-disclosing personal information, while keeping the data on his device. And the OmniOne network will just be here for managing the verification between the public key that will be available there. So this is, maybe I will run out of time, but we are the first company to have conducted business on DID-based projects with public and private institutions in Korea. And I see one of the big projects we are working on is with the Ministry of Public Safety and Security. We are providing the technology for the mobile ID card for civil servants that can be seen as a first step for them to go through a more deeper use of DID in maybe, why not in more like a digital identity for Korea. So we are hoping that we can prove them that the DID is strong enough for enabling this kind of use. And finally, I will conclude my presentation by saying that we are collaborating with the MyData operator. As Ilona mentioned before, Fujitsu is developing the MyData project it's called Personium. And we are discussing with Personium to how connecting DID and verifiable credential with MyData, since we believe that both are complementary in order to prove that the user that is uploading information on a personal data store is a true user, is a real user. We are keep looking for that, and we are keep also forward discussing with any project that would be interesting in integrating, in combining MyData with a DID based project. Thank you, guys. I think I will finish my presentation here.
Thank you, Alex, very much. These were the two presentations from Korea. And there's a question from Boo Harald concerning the interoperability, which you mentioned, and there's already a lively discussion in the chat. But Boo, do you want to take this question yourself?
Well, it's obviously I listened into it, and I heard somewhere that the interoperability issue is not perhaps yet solved in all aspects, and that is something that we in the MyData operator group obviously will have to address. I love the criteria for licensing MyData operators, and that seems to be going on like whatnot. But obviously, the interoperability ticking the box should be there. And as I'm working in the FINDI project here, that's where we are kind of starting from the trust over IP stack, and the question is that how much is trust over IP actually applied in Korea, which seems to be ahead of everyone else in the world. Otherwise,
you mean like how trust over IP foundation?
I mean, are you using the standards, the W3C and ISO standards and rule books that are ready from the foundation, open source, open code, everything right?
So actually, there is two things for my project. We are not directly working on the MyData areas. So we are working on the DID part, but for the DID part, indeed, we are using W3C standards like a VC, verifiable credentials and decentralized identifier. So we really want to. Our project, we are really building it on standards. But for MyData part, that's a good question. In Korea, for the MyData business, since they have to comply with a lot of common standards, I was believing that there would be this kind of criteria, but I couldn't find clearly stated this criteria in the requirements. And so I'm not sure how much interoperable the MyData business project in Korea can be interoperable.
Okay, maybe Jyrki, if you allow me, still briefly. In Europe, obviously, we are very much looking at the scenario where the trust over IP is kind of a theme already in half a dozen countries. And the good thing is that if you build this verifiable data network based on those open standards, global standards, you'll get interoperability from one country's network to another country's network by design, but not only in Europe, but actually globally, which we need. I mean, our mission is in MyData to make transfer of data across the globe as easy as payments or telephone calls. And there you need global standards.
I think that, as Mr. Kang mentioned before, and I think with the help of MyData Korea Hub, I guess that's one of the objectives they're also working on for discussing with the government, talking with them and seeing how to implement those standards when discussing about MyData business. That would be my understanding of these issues.
Let's do it. Thank you.
And this requirement, this actually the critical requirement for a truly global ID or a way to sort of use your identity in the internet, which doesn't have borders. So we can access services from around the globe, but why don't we have a global identity? I think this is something we cannot solve in the next 60 minutes, but I think there is a good discussion already starting on this point.
Just for rebounding on what you say, maybe that we have an optimistic point, maybe an optimistic finishing here. It's like Korea. Actually, if you look at the amendments to the law in Korea, it seems like it's linked with. They refer a lot to the GDPR. What happened with GDPR? So there is a willingness from Korean government to align with GDPR. And I believe that this is the first step for further implementing, I guess, interoperability. But technically speaking, there is no specific mention yet.
Absolutely. And then looking at the way the governments of Japan and also EU, there is this sort of single digital market, also a agreement between government of Japan and EU, and likewise there very well should be one between South Korea and the EU, Japan, sort of forming quite formidable business and amount of people. And now, for the sake of time, we only have 15 minutes left, and Vincent, you already hijacked the presentation, so feel free to start.
I thought to test it, to not waste time there. Can you hear me also?
Loud and clear. Please go ahead.
Good. Good. Then I will be try to be very brief. With a short intro of myself. My name is Vincent Jansen. Thank you for having me, Jyrki and Fujitsu. I'm a partner at Inopay, and Inopay is a Dutch consultancy firm. And basically, in short, we do innovation in payments, digital identity, and data sharing. And I've been doing so since 2003 when I joined the company. We have offices in Amsterdam, Berlin, and Frankfurt, but work all over the world. And that is also why I'm able to give you some insights on what is going on in Australia in this Consumer Data Rights Act. And I think in the intro, Jyrki already referred to the GDPR and the Privacy Acts that are in place. Australia is quite a tricky country as well. It is a federal government, but with a lot of decentralized authority in states. So there is a Central Privacy Act, but there's for digital information, there's a lot of state legislation implemented. But for the Consumer Data Rights Act that I will be talking about, there was again a federal regulation. So consumer data rights, I will talk you through the when, what, how, and why, what, how, and when. The consumer data rights is there, as the name explains, to give consumers rights on data And it's not only their own data, but it's also the data of the products and the services that they obtain from service providers to enable a good comparison of services. So that is also a big part of that regulation. Service providers should share in a concise manner through APIs their product and services information. But since we're talking about MyData here, I will not dive in too deep on that. So the why of CDR is really separate from that product information is to provide consumers the control over their data that is part of and generated by the services that they obtain from service providers like banks, like telcos. So what they envision and have been executing now is that basically through APIs and consent management mechanisms, consumers can exercise those rights and share in a standardized way through standardized processes their own data. And the approach that Australia has taken here is slightly different from we've seen in Europe already PSD2, and I think they watched and learned there. That was mainly PSD2 was mainly a government exercise. I think in Australia they did a better job in working together with the market on these standards from the start. So it is a standardization effort that is government led. There's a lot of soundboarding with the market for these API standards that underlie this legislation, and they've chosen. Although they say it is a generic right, so a consumer has this right across sectors, so not only in banking like with open banking, but they started with a phased rollout. So they earmarked banking sector as the sort of the pilot sector, and from there roll out CDR, and after banking, energy, and telecommunication are already on the roadmap. So where are we now? I think the next slide will show that the best, but in November 2017, this was envisioned, and the idea was to have this live in 2019. Incredible ambitious timelines if you compare it to the timelines that were adopted for implementing PSD2 in Europe. It was 2014 first conception to 2019, 20, 21 implementing it. So although this got a bit delayed and only was implemented in July of this year, still it's ambitious timelines and quite a successful implementation if you look at the elapsed time. So what CDR does basically divides data holders on the one side that have data and are enforced to open up. They in the roadmap made a slight difference between big banks that were required to go first and smaller banks that could come later, and on the accredited data recipient, and they started allowing applications as soon as the major banks were finished. So from an adoption perspective, at this point, there are 5 accreditations granted. So the major banks have all implemented this, and the smaller banks are in the process of doing that. And at the accreditation or at accredited data recipient side, there's now 5 accreditations, of whom are 3 active in the market. And it is Frollo, that is a bank, a regional Australia bank, and Intuit. The first one is really what we see in Europe as well happening. And there's a lot of aggregation and data harmonization kind of services. So Frollo steps in there as a sort of service provider for end users of that data. the bank really, the regional Australia bank is really working on product comparison and using that information to compete in that market. And Intuit is more a services firm for tax and other financial services, bookkeeping, accounting, software kind of things. So you already see in this very infant market in that sense that there's already a broader scope than just was intended by the regulation. The product comparison angle that sparked all this is used by the Australia Bank, but already you see new business models surrounding this free-flowing information. So if we look to the short future, although there are no timelines yet attached to it, so open energy is next. So that would be smart metering, and after that, open telecommunication. On the roadmap, we also see insurance and health with no timelines yet. Highlighting a bit what are challenges, and I think it was already said, but maybe to dive in a bit deeper, if you say businesses are going to open their information, then there might be some challenges surrounding the maturity of the digital channel. I want to dive in very shortly. I need 2 more minutes, I think. So if you look at banking, then the existing relationship through branches and through paper, mail, have already been replaced in a lot of cases by very mature digital channels for online banking and mobile banking, where sort of everything happens. So the step for opening up consumer data through digital channels and enabling customers to enforce their data rights and be in full control and give consent for things in online transactions is already in place at most banks. So banks have a clear advantage. And if we look at the other sectors that are on the CDR roadmap, then it is different. So if we look at energy, of course, there's existing relationships, but the maturity of the digital channel is lagging behind immensely if you compare that to banking. Telecom, especially where it concerns mobile, of course, is more similar to banking, but the insurance sector and the healthcare sector are less digital and have less established capabilities in their digital channels. So what we see, and what also the government in Australia saw, there is a need for at least digital identities to provide authentication, digital identity and authentication in those digital channels of those new data holders to enable consumers to be exercising their data rights and giving consent explicitly to sharing of data and transactions. So in Australia, there's 2 initiatives. One is a government-led initiative that's called TDIF, which is a digital identity framework that starts in the private sector, and slightly competing, but also complementary to some extent, there's Trust ID, which is created by the Australian financial sector. We as InnoPay were a part of that. And that basically provides a trust framework for digital identity, more driven from a private domain. And luckily, we already see, and that is good for also the rollout after the banking sector, that we see that there's several identity providers active in that market already providing these services, so probably already being able to help these new data holders that will emerge in the next phase of the rollout of CDR. I think that it was cutting it a bit short for time, but I hope that still an overview. And if you have questions, then I can take them now. But probably we don't have time for everything, so you can also reach out directly. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Vincent, very much to you. Again, after these really good 5 insightful presentations, we have room now for 3 minutes for questions. So just please raise your hand and ask the questions. And while we're waiting for the questions to roll in, maybe just give my 2 cents if it matters. So anything. So hearing what is going on in South Korea, what we heard last year going on in Japan, and now the Australian, the sort of the way of doing things together, the sort of having the iterative dialogue between the government, the regulators, and the industries. It seems that is actually the way to go, as it was shown in Vincent's presentation, that really sort of, instead of this maybe a little bit punitive regulations that PSD2 might be perceived by the banks and the industry, that this sort of the Australian way, let's try to solve the real problem in the real and the right way, really looks like the way to go. And it's very interesting to see that the South Korean and the Australian example both had the financial sector in, well, the most digitized industry in I think most of the world, countries in the world, that is leading the activities, leading the ways to go, and then sort of opening up the vaults of information, the personal information stored in there. I don't see any questions popping up in the chat, but let's open the mics and first come, first serve way that if there is questions, and we'll take those now. A couple of minutes left, a couple of minutes for these questions and answers.
If nobody else volunteers, I must say I was very impressed by this session altogether, and naturally having a background in banking, I know that banks are so very well suited for actually being a testing ground, handling verified data from the start, and having to have strong ID in any case, and being standardization experts. So I think we should do more of that all over the place, and get this public-private network to contain banks as well.
Absolutely, and a very good comment. This sort of working together, that is the only way to go. That is the only way to reach really good results. Chris, do you want to take this question on the standard API specs?
Sorry, I'm actually in a subway. But yeah, I was wondering if there is a document out there that I can kind of look at and see if there's a way to.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that, but another thing that they do very well in Australia is opening up this directly from the start. So every information that is surrounding this CDR is public information, so you can just see all the specs. I will look for the link, and I will post it in this chat, or make sure that Dixon has it and we add it to the post-conference document.
Thank you. Excellent. Being open, working together, that's the only way to go. That's the only way we, as all of us, we can create this human-centric world, not just industries, but create the human-centric world. We're now -1 minute time allowance. So I think it is time for us to end this session. And my heartfelt thanks for all of the great presenters. And again, I'm honored to be hosting this session. But as said, please keep in touch among this sort of the small audience that we had in this presentation. We have a good community here to really look beyond the sort of the usual borders that we tend to have this viewpoint from up here, Finland, Europe.